Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan Loew, and this is a special episode of True Crime Arizona, Lori Vallow's Deadly Delusions. We've had some breaking news in the case this week. First, Lori was indicted in Maricopa County for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder in the death of her then-husband, Charles Vallow. That was a big deal. But the indictment did not contain any details. It had nothing in it. But this morning, 2 days after that indictment, Chandler Police released their statement of probable cause, and this is a bombshell. Now, a lot of this is redacted, but it still contains a ton of new information about what happened leading up to Charles Vallow's death, what happened the morning of his death, and what happened shortly afterward. This is basically the investigators' case against Lori Vallow, and it is something else. I have the probable cause statement sitting in front of me, and for the next few minutes, I'm just going to go through it and point out some of the things that I think are significant and why. This is going to be a little less formal than our normal podcast format. And I've got to warn you guys, if you're not really up on this case already, this is probably going to seem a lot like inside baseball. But if you are very interested in the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case, this stuff here, I got to tell you, is gold. Okay, the probable cause statement is about 12 pages, 13 pages long. Some of it's redacted, but a lot of it is not. Right off the top in the synopsis, we've got an indication here of sort of what stood out to investigators when they showed up at the scene of the Charles Vallow murder. And they said here, after Alex Cox called 911, they processed the scene, and at the conclusion of the investigation that day, they already had some concern because there was an odd bullet strike on the ground near Charles Vallow's body, and I'm going to get into why that's significant here in a minute. But there was also concern regarding the timeline of events that came to light in the days following the homicide. So we see right off the bat, although Chandler PD kept all of the details of this case pretty close to the vest, it looks like right away they thought something didn't add up here. So as we move on in this statement of probable cause, they indicate that Charles and Lori were having marital problems, which we knew leading up to that. Lori had accused Charles of infidelity, and that led to their separation. And we heard Lori's sister talking about that in our last episode of the podcast, that Lori had accused Charles of cheating, and that had led to some problems there. But as we move on in this statement of probable cause, we also find out that Charles began to suspect that Lori was having a relationship with Chad Daybell. So their marriage was in trouble. They were accusing each other of cheating. And then this goes into information about the extent to which Lori had sort of started to fall into that cult-like mindset. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But I'm going to read you a paragraph from this statement here. It says, investigators from the Chandler Police Department, Gilbert Police Department, Rexburg Police Department, Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation began to coordinate efforts to locate JJ and Tylee, and also investigate the respective cases within their jurisdiction. This coordinated effort consisted of numerous search warrants on telephone records, social media accounts, bank records, medical records, email accounts, residences, and seized electronic devices. And here we go. As a result of the data recovered, it was believed that none of the mentioned crimes were coincidence or justifiable. Specifically to Chandler, the evidence shows that Charles's death was a planned event and necessary to prevent Charles and others from confronting Lori about her extreme religious beliefs when he came to town on July 11th, 2019. The death of Charles Vallow was also necessary in order for Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow to marry and fulfill their religious prophecy. That is directly out of the statement of probable cause. So what stands out here is that they believe that this death was because Charles was coming into town to sort of do an intervention with Lori about her religious beliefs, and that Lori and Chad believed that they needed to get Charles out of the way to marry and fulfill their religious prophecy. Wow. Moving down a little bit here, it goes into some detail about Lori and Chad's religious beliefs. A lot of us have read about this before, but there's one line here that sort of stands out to me. It was discovered that Lori and Chad believed that they had extraordinary abilities. Some of these abilities included the power to teleport and cause harm to others, the ability to call up natural disasters, the ability to pray away demonic spirits attached to others, and also visionary capabilities. Yeah, we had sort of read about some of these, beliefs that they had in some of these other ancillary court proceedings. This is the first one that I've read in a case that's sort of related to murder. Interesting stuff here. Okay, I'm going to move on to this next section here. So according to Chandler Police here, a lot of the information they got was from seized data extracted by the Gilbert Police Department after the death of Alex Cox. So a lot of the evidence in this case came from Alex Cox's cell phone that they were able to get from that after he passed away in December of 2019. And it's interesting here, it says, starting in November of 2018, Lori starts to refer to Charles as a dark spirit called Hiplos or Ned. So as early as November of the year before Charles was murdered, it looks like Lori was already sort of going down this path and had this name. They're referring to him as Ned, has the last name here, Ned or Hiplos. So that's what they were calling him, and that becomes important here in a second as we move further down these pages. So after Charles was killed, this is July 18th, 2019, 1 week after Charles was murdered. This is a text message from Lori to Chad Daybell. And she says, so I talked to the insurance company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. They can't tell me who, of course, but it's done. I still get the $4,000 a month from SS. Wow. So this is a text message from Lori to Chad Daybell a week after Charles died. And she has researched his life insurance. And she found at that point that he had changed the beneficiary in March, earlier that spring. And we know that. We reported that here at CBS 5 and 3 TV. We're the first to report about this life insurance policy a year and a half ago. But she says here, so it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. Ned, remember, is the name that she and Chad had given to Charles as like the evil spirit. So they're saying that Ned is the one that changed the life insurance policy, but then they say, before we got rid of him. How haunting is that? I am going to assume that prosecutors are going to use that as an admission of guilt. It may be difficult to prove that Ned means Charles, but that is pretty chilling. And then she talks about getting $4,000 a month from Charles's Social Security survivor benefits. This is all new details here. Okay. We're sort of jumping around in time as we sort of discuss this evidence here, but there's something here from June 29th of 2019. So this is all leading up to Charles coming into town to have this confrontation, this intervention with Lori. He ends up dying. He ends up getting murdered before he's able to do it. But leading up to this, on June 29th, so that is, roughly 10 days, 12 days before he dies, it says, Charles Vallow discovered a fictitious letter that Lori sent to, and then the name is blocked out. So Lori sends this fictitious letter to somebody. It says, this letter was written as if it was from Charles Vallow asking Chad Daybell to come to Arizona to assist him with writing a book. This discovery would send everything into action. This discovery would send everything into action. Charles confronted Lori about the fictitious letter, accusing her of writing the letter so Chad Daybell could provide a reason to his wife to come to Arizona to visit Lori. Charles asked Lori to come clean about her relationship with Chad Daybell by the end of the day, or he would contact Tamra Daybell and inform her of the relationship. June 29th, 2019, roughly 10, 12 days before Charles Vallow is killed, he finds this letter, and then he tells Lori, come clean about your relationship to Chad, or I am going to tell Tamra Daybell. And Chandler PD writes here that this discovery would send everything into action. Following the discovery of this letter, Charles Vallow began talking to one of Lori and Alex's other brothers, another brother of Lori and Alex. The name is redacted, but it says it's a brother, about his discovery as well as Lori's radical beliefs. The two then communicated with each other with a plan of an intervention on or around 7/10/2019. Charles had arranged to come to Arizona and also arranged travel for this brother. So apparently it was Charles and one of Lori's brothers, who we have not heard anything from, this other brother, were planning to come and do this intervention. Now, this is interesting. There's a bunch of wording that is redacted, that's blacked out. But then at the bottom it says, there is no obvious communication found between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell to show that he was directly involved with the planning of Charles Vallow's murder. So they're sort of saying that they don't have any evidence that Chad had anything to do with the planning, or at least obvious enough to come to charges. It says Lori found out about the potential intervention on 7/9/2019. So July 9th, this is the day before Charles comes into town. Lori finds out that Charles is coming in to do this intervention with her other brother. And she finds out about it. So Charles comes into town on the 10th. The morning of the 11th, July 11th, 2019, at 7:35 in the morning, Charles Vallow arrived at Lori's rental house to pick up JJ. So that's 7:35 in the morning that he arrived to pick up JJ. And then we know what happens next. At least what we have heard, there was a fight, and then Alex shot Charles. But a lot of what we thought we knew about that is changed now. because of what we're about to find out here. Okay, I'm going to read a paragraph here. Following the murder of Charles Vallow, Lori took his rental vehicle and cellular phone. The GPS data associated with the phone indicated that the phone left the residence at 7:49 hours. So he got there at 7:35 in the morning. By 7:49, 14 minutes later, Lori's out the door with Charles's car and cell phone. So we can assume that within that 14 minutes, he was shot and killed. Okay, Lori went to Burger King to get food for JJ, Walgreens to get flip-flops for her and Tylee, and finally returned home at 8:48 hours, 8:48 in the morning. Now, this is new. Alex Cox would not call 911 until 8:32 to report the shooting. When reporting the incident, Alex indicated that it just happened. He was provided with CPR instructions, and he acted as if he was performing life-saving measures on Charles. It was not until emergency personnel began life-saving measures that they saw blood coming from Charles's body. This would indicate that Alex performed no emergency aid. Based on this timeline, Charles would have laid dead or dying for approximately 43 minutes before Alex called 911. During this time, phone records indicated that Alex called Lori. 43 minutes. Alex shoots him. He's down. Lori takes off, goes to Burger King, goes to Walgreens to get flip-flops. 43 minutes later, Alex calls 911 and pretends that he's performing CPR. And they figure that out, that he was pretending, because when the paramedics arrived and they actually started performing CPR, blood started coming out of, I would imagine, the injury, the bullet hole, or out of his mouth, and it had not happened yet. So they could tell nobody had performed CPR. So that is a big, big deal. But that's not it. Here's another paragraph that I'm going to read. As part of this investigation, Alex performed a walkthrough for investigators. Alex indicated that as Charles was coming at him, he shot him twice in the chest while Charles was standing. Trajectory at autopsy discovered that one of these shots would be consistent with this statement. This shot would have gone through Charles and ended up in the baseboard behind him. However, the second shot entered below Charles's ribcage and exited through his upper left shoulder, causing a shored wound and defect in the flooring where Charles was found. This angle would indicate that Charles was already laying on the floor when this second shot was fired. So what we had heard, I don't even know if we knew that there were two shots. I didn't see an autopsy before this. And I remember, as I was reporting in the past, trying to find something that said it was one or two shots. But let's assume that they had reported that Alex had shot him twice. So he told police that he shot Charles in the chest twice as he was coming at him. But when they did the autopsy and they looked at the floor underneath the body, they found a divot from that second bullet. So the first bullet was consistent, the trajectory, with somebody being shot while they were standing up. The second one, it's like Alex goes over him and shoots down at him, and it goes in, ricochets off the floor under the body, and then goes back up through the body. And they could tell immediately that day that there was something wrong because they saw that divot in the ground. And that's what I talked about in the beginning. It was that initial view of the scene that homicide investigators said, well, wait, he said he shot him twice while he was standing up, but look, there's a divot in the ground consistent with a bullet. And that's what got them on the idea right away, although they did not report that to us in the media, that they thought there might be more to this than a family fight and self-defense, which is what Alex Cox had originally told investigators. So, I read through this, and this just opened up a whole new view of this case. It sounds like they have a lot of evidence, both text messages, physical forensic evidence. What they don't have are any witnesses because of all the people who were there that morning. Charles Vallow, Alex Cox, Tylee, JJ, and Lori. Only Lori is still alive. They have no witnesses, but they were able, from text messages and forensic evidence and emails and testimony, like witness statements, Alex Cox's statements, to piece together the narrative of what they believe happened. It was not the story they were told that day. This is really, really interesting stuff, and we haven't been given any indication of the evidence that they have in Idaho tying Lori or Chad, real evidence tying them to the deaths of Tylee JJ or Tammy Daybell. This case looks like they've got some good evidence here, and I would not be surprised. I'm not making a prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised if they try to get Lori out here to Arizona to try her in this case for conspiracy before they even do that other case. I am not sure how, that legal wrangling would work between prosecutors, but this looks like they have some solid detective work here. Okay, so that's it for now. We're going to have an all-new episode of Lori Vallow's Deadly Delusions next week when we take up the story as Lori leaves Chandler and moves to Rexburg, Idaho, just as her children start to disappear. We're going to throw in these sort of special episodes with updates and the breaking news as it happens, and then we'll go back to our normal in between, just telling this story and examining every detail that we can think of, every detail that we see as the story unfolds. Okay, this podcast is written and reported by Kim Powell and Morgan Loew. Gilbert Zermanio and Edward Ayala are editors. True Crime Arizona, Lori Vallow's Deadly Delusions is a production of Arizona's Family, 3TV, CBS 5, and azfamily.com in Phoenix, Arizona.